Hiya there guys, so I'm going to do a sports video tonight. This one's going to be my review of the recently finished summer internationals, rugby internationals. So I'm going to have a quick look at the results, and we'll have a little look over how the teams are shaping up going into 1 year out from the World Cup next year in France. And safe to say there's some major shocks in the autumn, not the autumn, but the summer this year. Hopefully it'll be in the autumn as well. But yeah, no, this has been a particularly really enjoyable summer of rugby. I thought the writing was on the wall coming into the autumn for a lot of teams, particularly Wales and England Wales going to South Africa and England going down to Australia. And there was a lot of hope really for Ireland going to New Zealand and Scotland going to Argentina as well. But as we'll see, things didn't pan out for some of the teams, and some teams did actually pretty well. So let's have a little look at the results, what we had. So let's start it off in the first week. So we saw a classic All Blacks team beat Spain in Madrid, which was quite enjoyable. Anything to raise the profile of rugby in Spain is good. And then we started seeing the teams get a couple of games under their belt. So Japan defeated Uruguay 34-10 as a nice warm-up to their series with France. We then saw England comfortably dismantled at home by the Barbarians team, which was quite surprising because England had picked quite a lot of what you could consider would be first-line players in the team as well. But the Barbarians on the day was just scoring some outrageous tries, as they always do, and a hell of a lot of top 14 players who've come off, an incredible season, particularly, relish dismantling England at Twickenham as well. So that was a really surprising result, 52-21 there. So we start to see then the teams go into it fully. Again, Japan dismantling Uruguay 43-7 there, and then we'll go into the first week of fixtures. So let's have a quick look at a couple of results. Portugal and Italy as well. I do know Italy, they had to score a last minute try to pretty much come through against Portugal, but Portugal very, very close again to a good scalp. They nearly beat Japan a little while back, and Italy very, very fortunate to get away with the win there. And then we see the first week. The Maori All Blacks against Ireland, they won comfortably 32-17. Italy defeating Romania as well, easily 45-13. You see the United States beat the French Barbarians team, and then early kick-off. I did manage to catch a little bit of this game the first weekend, but France beating Japan 42-23. France took a couple of frontline players like Penaud and Olivon came back into the team as well. Jaminet having another run at 10 as well, in Antamac's absence as well. Baptiste Coulio playing 2. Japan, considering that they had a good couple of results before that, didn't really shine too well in the first game. But I do know, all you have to do is, if you look at the referee in that game as well, I think I did remember Frank Murphy, the Irish ref, just having a pretty shocking game as well. And unfortunately, there is a really big crop of crap referees at the minute in World Rugby, and it's, since Nigel Owens has left and Wayne Barnes has taken a bit of a step back, I think the only decent really one I know is Luke Pearce of England, who's pretty good at the moment. But the crop of referees, particularly coming from Ireland, absolutely shocking, absolutely terrible. Then we saw New Zealand pretty much take a 1-0 series lead against Ireland. Ireland did they did play well for a little while. They started every test in the summer well, but unfortunately the All Blacks came back into it, and there was a period, I think, of just before half time that they just totally dismantled Ireland when they were down a card, I believe. And they just took their foot off the off the brake, and they just went for it, and took the game away from Ireland before half time, really. Australia coming through against England as well. That was an expected result. I did tip Australia to win the series. To be fair, I thought that they've been coming strong over the last rugby championship. They had a poor showing in the autumn last year, losing to Wales and Scotland as well. England, though, they had a little bit to work on. They really had to put in a good performance after a really poor Six Nations, and they did so to a certain degree, but it was just a bit too much towards the end of the game there. South Africa against Wales. Now, this game was just massively heartbreaking from a Welsh perspective. Wales were like 18 nil up at one point, 15 nil up at one point, and surrendered the game 32-29. Unfortunately, it's happened to Wales quite a few times in the past. I remember in 2008, Wales went down to Australia and lost 2 of the tests with the last kick of the game against Australia. I saw it's pretty much been either Australia or South Africa we've lost last minute to. I remember 2015 World Cup South Africa, 2019 World Cup South Africa as well. So, it is a little bit of a theme going here with South Africa. We need to put that to bed a little bit. But in fairness, they did work their way back into the game. Wales didn't do enough. They stopped playing rugby. When South Africa made their changes, they just sort of powered through and took the game away from Wales, unfortunately. I thought we got a draw at the end when Derby Lake scored, but it wasn't to be, unfortunately. Then a couple of other results as well. We see Italy A playing against Currie Cup 15, Canada v Belgium. Argentina beat Scotland. Argentina looked alright. They looked pretty good in the first test against Scotland. I know Scotland scored a couple of tries, but they were really poor, Scotland, in the first test against Argentina. Just lacked any sort of emphasis, physicality. I don't think that the boy that they played at 10, I can't remember his name now, the 15, but let's have a quick look at the team. I can't remember. What was it now? Blair Kinghorn. Unfortunately, for me, that he's not a 10. He's a decent fullback. He's a big boy, but he isn't a 10, unfortunately, for me. He doesn't have any sort of control or leadership looking at all from that 10 spot. They don't really have an awful lot of depth in that position, to be honest, outside of Finn Russell, and I suppose Hulk could play there, but you don't really want him there. But Argentina, good promising start under Michael Cheika, so yeah, very good. And then the second week then, Japan against France. So this is really disappointing for Japan. They did so well to keep France out until the last 10 minutes, where France were absolutely shocking compared to the first week. Their handling skills were ridiculous. Japan pretty much had put them in a bit of a anaconda grip in the game and had squeezed them out. It's not as if France didn't have chances as well. They just kept on putting the ball to ground. There wasn't really anything in it at all in the game. It was 15-13 going into the last bit. But yeah, France just managed to get out of jail there, and a quality scrum half, their third or fourth choice scrum half, Coolio scoring the try, and what an amazing player. Ireland getting their first victory on New Zealand soil, 23-12. Much deserved victory as well. They were outstanding. Some of the rugby they played in the second test, Ireland, was amazing to watch. New Zealand, the scoreline does favour them a little bit, being that close, to be quite honest. They weren't really in the game much. Ireland just took it away from them. I just think their attack variation is so impressive. So many threats coming at defences that it's really hard to sort of strangle Ireland. Unless Ireland go slow or one-dimensional, then you really are up against it. And Ireland scoring tries after tries as well. Excellent performance as well. England bounced back against Australia. Australian inconsistency, they're like two peas in a pod, really. Unfortunately, Australia didn't back up the win from the week before. And England came through, some of their old guard having much better games in the second test, like Vunipola, Farrell as well. The pack in particularly were a lot more abrasive in the second test and didn't really allow Australia too much of a domination that they had in the first test as well. The most surprising result from, I would say, from this summer rugby, I would say, if you had said before the summer tour the Wales would win in South Africa, where so many good Welsh sides have gone out there and lost in the past, particularly thinking about 2014 when Liam Williams cost us a win in South Africa. But this win was incredibly well worked. Yeah, there was a lot of talk before the game about whether South Africa had fielded a second or third string team, and I don't think so. I mean, my perspective was that such is the depth of South African rugby and the strength of their URC players like Evan Roos, that they were able to field such a good team, but unfortunately they did come up short. And I don't think it can be understated to beat South Africa in South Africa, and their main player is playing as well, which is Andre Pollard. That was a massive, massive scalp for Wales as well. And I think that the try at the end by Josh Adams was incredibly well worked, and the boys deserved it. So hats off to them. I suppose the only downside being quite a bit of a skeptic of him and critical of him as a coach, but I suppose it does give breathing room and legitimacy for PVAC to continue through to the World Cup. But Wales incredibly inconsistent. I mean, you've gone from fifth place, first place, fifth place, and a loss to Italy to then winning in South Africa. You just can't get a read on Wales at the minute, and the potential is there, but whether the belief and the availability of key players is there is anybody knows. Now going down to Argentina against Scotland. Now Argentina were absolutely destroyed by Scotland in the second test. Scotland were scoring easy tries against Argentina. They were winning the collisions, most importantly as well, with Scotland. They looked hungry for the victory as well. They just they won the battle before they played wide, and then when they did play wide with Gregor Townsend, Flair, they looked good as well, Scotland, and that was one of the better performances I've seen from Scotland in a while. Again, they had a bit of a patchy Six Nations. I mean, to lose to such a poor Welsh side in Cardiff after again beating England is just unforgivable, really. But there you go. Georgia beating Italy, much deserved victory for Georgia against Italy. They were really impressive. The fullback, I can't remember his name, but the fullback playing for Georgia is out of this world. I can't remember. He plays top 14 rugby, I believe, and Italy weren't even in the game, really. I mean, Georgia just absolutely blew them away, and some of the tries that they scored were out of this world. It's not the stodgy sort of forward orientated pick and drive 10-man rugby that you'd see a tough, abrasive, developing Tier 2 nation playing. This has been on the cards for a while, the Georgian revolution, and I can see them going the way of Argentina in a certain degree, how they've hybrided their game between abrasive forward play and good backline play. They've got a good crop at the minute, and they've got a good blend, I think. So when they play Wales in the autumn, if Wales are on it, they best look out, because they've turned over Italy now, and they've had the potential to turn over a lot of other sides in the past as well. A couple of other results: Romania defeating Uruguay, Canada losing to Spain. I mean, Canadian rugby has just gone back fucking leaps and bounds, hasn't it? I mean, Canada, used to be an incredibly well-respected rugby nation, but just the performances and scorelines over the last few years has just been so poor at 15s level. I mean, the sevens they've been pretty decent. I mean, they're competitive at sevens, but their 15s. I mean, Canada's got a really proud history of 15s. I mean, they've beaten Wales, they've beaten France, they've beaten England. They've played a World Cup quarter final against New Zealand, for God's sake, and it's to see where they are now. It's a real shame, I will say. It's a real shame, but hopefully they get that back. Ireland midweek team defeating Maori, and then here was the weekend. So this is the deciding weekend. All 4 Test series were on the line. France had already wrapped up their series; they'd beaten Japan, but the main 4 Test series: Ireland v New Zealand, England v Australia, South Africa v Wales, and Argentina versus Scotland. Now, I had a sneaky feeling Ireland would do it, irrespective of what New Zealand were going to bring to the party. New Zealand had been looking off it all series, and they'd carried a hangover from the end of the autumn rugby, where they had lost in Dublin and lost convincingly in Paris as well. To lose to Ireland as well at this point, and with such a margin, was incredible. I mean, Ireland, I would probably say the 2 Irish victories in New Zealand is probably some of the best rugby performances I've seen, and particularly Irish rugby performances as well. They are really up there. So for Ireland to win a series in New Zealand prior to a World Cup gives them absolute credentials to say we are amongst it as favourites. Not only are we going to hit the quarter-final and hit the semi-final, but we're going to look to win it as well. And I hope they do. You know, it'd be lovely to see a brand new winner of the tournament, whether that's Ireland or France. So, you know, I hope either of them do end up winning it, quite honestly. But yeah, to beat New Zealand 32-22, New Zealand in real trouble at the minute. Just something's not right. I don't think that the best players in New Zealand are being picked for the All Blacks, quite frankly. I don't know whether they require a change in voice, because the coaching voice, in particular Foster's voice, has been there for a good long while, and I think they've turned down their best opportunity as well for another World Cup, which was to hire Scott Robertson last year or the year before. But New Zealand rugby, they don't do radical change, so we'll wait and see. I mean, rugby championship wise, they've already sort of come back, and they've lost one convincingly. They've won one now, so we'll see how they get on. Then we see Australia versus England, a game with quite a lot of niggle in it. This result was shocking in the sense of I didn't expect England to win the series. I thought that Australia would come back again and they would win the 3rd test. I thought that they owed England one from a few years back when they whitewashed Australia 3-0. But Australia's injuries throughout the series was just another level of incredible, really. England, though, you know, hats off to England. They really stuck it out. They did what they needed to do. They played hard rugby. They played abrasive. They played tight, and they've got results. And that's all you can ask for, really. Because Eddie Jones's job, particularly, I think if he'd lost the series, would be in major question a year out from the World Cup with such a poor Six Nations as well. But again, like Wayne Pivac, it's been vindicated somewhat. So England win there 21-17 and win the series 2-1. Then we see Georgia pick up another victory against Portugal. Close game. You know, very impressed by Portugal. I'd like to see them get another Tier 1 game, perhaps against Scotland or Wales. And then we see South Africa-Wales. You know, I thought Wales had played okay to a point in this test, but by missing key players in the starting lineup, which was Faletau, Navidi and Anscombe, really did take away any sort of emphasis and quality that Wales had in their squad for the game. Particularly Faletau had a brilliant series up until then, and Navidi had played well in the second test. Same as Anscombe as well. Anscombe was instrumental in creating the try at the end of the second test, but I think this one was a game too far for Wales. And I think this is where the physicality and the depth of just big men South African rugby really just pulverised Wales a little bit. And the scoreline does suggest a bit close, but when you're watching it, I personally could only see one winner in the game. There was never really a point in which I thought Wales are going to kick on score here, and we're gonna be up by 7 or 8 points and hold on for dear life. There was never that point of the game, unfortunately, and South Africa deserved it overall. I mean, they've won the series 2-1, but a very competitive series. And again, these two teams are really close together. They play quite limited rugby, I will say, the two of them. And Wales do play limited rugby against South Africa to nullify their strength. Be interesting in the autumn then to see if, I don't think Wales playing South Africa on the autumn, but how South Africa fare against the other teams, because they've played Wales quite a lot in the last few years. So let's see how they get on with other teams, and can Wales take their victory in South Africa and run with it? We'll soon see. And okay, and then the last result of the series, Argentina taking the game, which was 34-31 against Scotland. Massive heartbreak for Scotland. Try in the very end of the game of the series wins it for Argentina. Argentina had been alright in the game. Scotland were impressive, in fairness to them. It was a very well fought last test, I will say, and really enjoyable. Checkers Argentina look okay. You can see that they're still trying to get to grips with him, and that he's still trying to find out about them. But to beat the Scots twice at home, you know, is good. Is a good result. Scotland, what would they take away from it? They require more depth at outside half. I don't think Blair is the answer for them. They've developed some really good depth in their pack as well. Backline seems to be a bit of a strange one, really. A lot of utility players, not really any sort of youth pushing through, any star of the future, really, I can think of. Ali Price, I don't know. I mean, it seems that his form has fallen off a cliff a little bit after the Lions, but I suppose that can come back in any time when the new season kicks off. But I mean, overall, a really, really enjoyable summer of rugby. So just to wrap it up then, where are we with everything? So we're going to be looking forward now to the autumn. Well, at present, you've got the Rugby Championship ongoing. So you've got South Africa buoyed by their series win against Wales, looking really to, I would say, would be favourite South Africa at the minute to win the Rugby Championship, to pulverise teams into submission. But South Africa really have to look at their depth and their squad blend as well. I think that there will be a time where their type of rugby may catch up with them. It was enough to win them the World Cup in 2019. But with certain rule changes recently, and also with how teams are developing the game, particularly France and Ireland, with offloading, continuity-based rugby, and threats coming from everywhere in attack, it is really nullifying the sort of ultra-defensive, one-dimensional rugby that South Africa do play. I mean, they are effective at it. I mean, you know, kudos South Africa, they're world champions, but you know, I think that's where South Africa were looking to be for next year. Where are they going to take their game? And that's interesting to see what they do with their selection then. New Zealand are in turmoil. I've never seen New Zealand this bad in my life. I do remember them not being as competitive in some parts of the 90s when Australia were the preeminent Southern Hemisphere team. But New Zealand, I don't think I've ever seen it this bad at the moment. There's on-field and off-field strife. There are players who are not playing to their potential. There are players who are better who are not playing for the All Blacks. The coaching staff is chopping and changing, but the main man who's there seems to be the glaring obvious one who needs to go. And they are in New Zealand quite averse to radical change. They will bring it back because they're just stubborn buggers, and they will eventually kick back into form. But whether that will be enough to win the World Cup, I don't know. They have it in their power. They can if they want to. But I fancy France to win that opening game against New Zealand all day so far in the World Cup, as far as I can see, with everyone permitted being fit and no explosions in France's mentality before then. So that's where we're at. Argentina, like I said, just trying to feel each other out with the coach at the minute. Just trying to understand where they want to be. Argentina are a massive threat against anybody really. Once they click, they can destroy you like they did in 2015 against Ireland in the quarterfinals. They can turn people over. They've beaten the All Blacks the first time in the last 18 months. They've just put nearly 50 points on Australia in the Rugby Championship. They go to New Zealand now to try and win away and make more history. And yeah, interesting for Argentina just to see where they go. I mean, they're not a massive favourite, but they are very, very dangerous side. And Australia really backed up losing the series to England with a second half performance really against Argentina in their Rugby Championship. A crap performance in the second test, and yeah, it's a very strange one for Australia. I don't know what type of game they're trying to play at the minute. I mean, they seem to be too light up front. Obviously, missing Hooper has been a massive problem the last couple of games, but they should be good enough. They should be good enough to be competitive, and I think that's the problem. Once they're not competitive, that's when the Aussie public will turn away from rugby union, because there's just other sports on offer in Australia like Aussie rules and NRL and cricket. So there you are. For the Six Nations teams, well done. Every single one of them did well. Ireland in particular, best performer, winning in New Zealand 2-1. France winning 2-0 with their third string away in Japan, not too bad. Wales winning one game in South Africa, that's the first ever, well done. England winning their series, steadies the ship somewhat for Eddie. And Scotland losing in Argentina, excellent second test performance. They need that's got to be the standard, but until Scotland can cut out their inconsistencies, I don't think that we're not going to see any change anytime soon. Italy lost in Georgia. They need to I think they need a scalp in the autumn really to vindicate beating Wales in Cardiff, that wasn't a one-off really. But there you go. So hopefully you enjoyed all the summer rugby, and you're looking forward to the autumn. So the autumn rugby, how are we looking for it? So let's have a quick look. Autumn Rugby Internationals. Let's have a look at the rundown this year. So yeah, I do consent. Okay, so we've got week 1, very exciting. Japan v New Zealand in Tokyo. That'll be a good tri-fest, hopefully. Scotland, Australia in Edinburgh. Then you've got Wales, New Zealand. I've got tickets for that one. I hope New Zealand is still on the downslope so we can get our first victory in 70 years. It's a massive game first up. Ireland v South Africa. That's a massive litmus test for Ireland. And they will be looking to back up what they've done in New Zealand with a home victory against South Africa. If they do, my money's on Ireland to win the Grand Slam in 2023 Six Nations. Going into the World Cup, they would be very, very strong contenders for the tournament then. France, Australia, that's an interesting one. France, South Africa the following week. Again, France, normally they don't play so many big hitters in the autumn, one after each other, but they are, in fairness. France, Japan is the last game. Wales play Australia, Wales play Georgia, and they play Argentina. Scotland, New Zealand as well. Scotland, Argentina. So yeah, it's going to be a good couple of weeks. Good couple of weeks for the autumn. It's always good. Cardiff's always packed as well. So make sure everyone wraps up warm, enjoys it, and just stays tuned for more rugby. And hopefully you did enjoy the video. Like, subscribe, and let me know what you thought of the summer as well.